Okay, so just thought I'd jump back on the tail end of my holiday to talk about an interesting observation around the timing with which Trump suddenly reversed course. As we know, he'd been threatening major tariffs on countries all around the world for the last week, and he seemed to be completely unfazed by the fact that the markets were tanking in every region around the world. Day in, day out, stocks were going down and down and further down, and he claimed to be unfazed by this. And then something happened the day that he seemed to suddenly decide that he wasn't going to go ahead with it, and that was a change in the bond markets. You see, what we noticed for the first time in this kind of scenario was that US bond yields were actually going up, and it's around exactly that time that Trump suddenly issued his reversal.
It definitely seems that at least a significant piece of why President Trump did today what he did is because of the US bond market.
Yes.
Where actually we started to see a huge sell-off. And that's pretty interesting because he seemed pretty unsympathetic to the sell-off in stocks. And so one of the things that I think we learned today is that he is at least worried about the bond market.
Now, a government's bond yields are essentially the way of purchasing government debt. So when a government goes into debt, it issues bonds, and anybody can buy those bonds and they get interest for keeping those bonds. That interest is called the yield on the government bonds. Now, these are considered to be safe bets. These are considered to be safe investments. Generally, bond yields are what people put money into when the rest of the stock market is in chaos. And that's especially the case for US government bonds, because that's considered to be the safest of all safe harbors. And when more people invest in government bonds, the yields on those bonds, the interest rates on those bonds actually goes down, because more and more people want to purchase the government debt. And so because of the competition, the interest rates that the government has to pay on that debt actually goes down. So the yields on government bonds tends to reduce. So whenever you see a market crash, sure as night follows day, US bond yields will then go down. And so perversely, a stock market rout actually acts in some ways to the advantage of a government, because they don't have to pay so much for their debt anymore, because the bond yields have gone down, because so much money is pouring into government bond yields as a safe place for people to keep their money, that the interest rates government have to pay on their debt goes down. And no doubt the Trump economic team expected that too, that the tariffs are likely to have a knock-on economic impact which will negatively impact the markets, but it will positively impact bond yields, which will then go down, making borrowing easy for us, helping us balance the budgets a bit more easily, because we won't have to pay so much interest on our debt every month as a result. But something perverse, peculiar, and effectively unprecedented happened on the day that Trump announced his reversal, and that was that US bond yields actually went up. People were selling off US government bonds, and so the interest the government had to pay on them was going up and up. This was threatening to balloon the US budget. And not only that, it was a huge blow to the US reputation, because it's always seen as that safe zone where you can go to when the rest of the financial market is in chaos. But that didn't happen this time. Now, this kind of perverse bond yield rise has happened to other countries before, but not really in this way to the US. It happened to the UK when we had an equally calamitous Prime Minister, Liz Truss. She only lasted about a month, the shortest serving Prime Minister in the whole of British history, and that's a lot of history, because she announced a budget that included swingeing tax cuts for the wealthiest in society, but no plans to balance the budget, not even any prospect of future fiscal rectitude. She hadn't even consulted what's known here as the Office for Budget Responsibility to find out what the projections were in the future. The markets completely lost faith in her ability and her government's ability to govern. So not only did the stock market crash, UK government bond yields also went up at that point. And so that meant the government had to pay more to service its own debt, had to pay more in interest payments, and it affected interest payments for everybody. So all of us had to pay more for all of our mortgages and loans and interest payments. And from that point onwards, a new lexicon was invented in the financial markets to describe errant and rogue politicians and their impact on the financial system. And it was christened the moron premium. And this is what the financial world termed it. The extra premium you have to pay on interest, particularly government interest, when there's somebody completely incompetent at the wheel. The additional price that needs to be paid for that. And that exact terminology is now being used again for the US. Because for the first time, when stock markets are crashing, US bond yields are doing the opposite of what they're supposed to do. Instead of going down, they're going up. In other words, people are selling US bonds as well as stocks and shares. And so the US government is having to pay what they call a moron premium.
The treasury market is the US government bond market. In the UK, we call our bonds gilts, so it's the equivalent. And we're seeing a very dangerous dynamic of synchronized selling, which is US stocks, which was the dominant story after April 2nd, they sold off. Then this contagion has now spilled into the bond market, and it looks like it's also spilling into the dollar. So any US denominated asset is now like a hot potato that investors, hedge funds want to drop. And this is a premium that you mentioned, gilts, that we're kind of used to in the UK because it was a so-called moron premium attached to Liz Truss. In some senses, Liz Truss makes what's happening, the Liz Truss moment looks like a storm in a teacup, because if you have a moron premium attached to the world's most powerful economy with the world's safest assets, the dollar and US bonds, and if nobody wants to hold them, then we're kind of at an all bets are off moment for the financial system. So it's almost hard to overstate how unprecedented the storm over financial markets could become.
So what must have happened is that the Treasury Secretary and other economic officials must have had to sit down with Trump and say, listen, Mr. President, we expected there to be some market repercussions. We expected there to be some degree of turmoil. We expected there to be some sell-off as a result of the tariffs that you're imposing around the world. We're cool with that. We expected that. We also thought that we would harvest a little bit of reward from this because US bond yields will probably go down, which means that it'll be easier for us to balance the budget. But the opposite is happening. For the first time ever, people are selling US government bonds as well as stocks and shares. They're not coming to US government bonds as a place to find some respite from the turmoil of the market. They're actually selling them off. It's a vote of no confidence in the US government, the likes of which we've never seen before. And it's going to severely impact our budgets in future and severely impact our prospects in future and the entire market's view of the US as the fundamental anchor in the global financial system. And so he turned on the brakes. Not because of stocks or shares going down, but because of US bond yields going up. Now, this has such an impact that it could well go beyond the short term. It could be something that is irreversible. It could be a change of attitude towards the US and its full faith and credit that affects every administration in the future. Because once you've gone through that door, once you cease to see the US as the safest and most secure security there is, then how are you going to go back to the old world when we all thought that they were? This is why I truly believe when people ask me what can we do about this, my answer is not just more of the same of what used to be. It needs to be not just about a change of personnel or even a change of party. It needs to be about a change of system. We need to use technology to involve everybody in the process of making decisions right now. We need to not just get involved at time of crisis. People need to be involved in their own governance on a regular basis. There are experiments around things like this around the world, like citizens' juries and citizens' assemblies, where average members of the public are brought together to listen to experts and evidence from around the world about key issues and make decisions on those. Participatory democracy, where we're all involved in our own governance. And we can use technology to help us with that. Open source technology, technology that isn't owned by corporations, technology that is seen by us all and isn't tampered with because it's owned by the public in general. They can help us deliberate together on policies and make decisions together and not outsource the business of government to just a small number of people elected for us. The days when a couple of hundred politicians make decisions for all of us and we invest so much power in a few people should be over. We have too much information. There's too much creativity out there. There's too much to lose if we leave the system as it is now. That's what I advocate for, and I'll say a lot more about this in videos to come. It's one of the major reasons I created this channel. I'll be talking about it, issuing videos about it, writing books about it. You'll all get to learn more about this as time goes on. I'm not the first person to have these ideas. They've been around for a long time. It's time to use this crisis to create something new. And that change needs to start with our political system. Thank you for watching my video. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm also interested in philosophy and public policy and politics. I aim to make a number of videos about these subjects and particularly the intersection between them. If you're able to like and subscribe to this channel, then it'll really help, and also put in some comments whenever you can. That'll really help the algorithm. It'll really help promote this channel to other people. Now, beyond that, we are all, unfortunately, at the behest of a very small number of people who seem to run everything these days. And we are all at the whim of a tech oligarch who could decide tomorrow to end a channel like this because it's not in their favor. And because of that, I've set up a kind of email newsletter, which you can subscribe to. At the top of the channel, you'll see a web address. Please go there and subscribe to my newsletter. That way you can stay in touch with the videos I'm making. At least we can keep the content flowing. So I hope you can do that. And I hope we can keep talking and also gain clarity, not just about what's happening right now, but how we can get through this, how we can improve things to make a better tomorrow together. Thank you.